Here we go then, folks. It is finally time for the PlayStation 1 Complete Collection video. Strap yourself in for this one. Hello again, folks, and welcome back to a very special video, as this week sees the first part of a full collection video for the PlayStation 1, the iconic console from Sony that launched in 1995 and arguably changed the face of gaming forever. Who would have thought back in 1995 that Sony would not only go up against but beat the likes of Nintendo and Sega to become one of the market leaders in the video game market? And what a console it was. So many iconic franchises were spawned from this one console, and arguably it changed the face of gaming forever, turning it into something that wasn't just in the bedroom, it was a worldwide just phenomenon. It was suddenly cool to be a gamer. For me personally, back in the day, I wasn't a huge fan of the PlayStation 1. I was actually a massive Nintendo fanboy, and I can understand how a console that was only 32-bit and had CDs could possibly go up against the power of a Nintendo 64, a console that was twice as powerful. But that was the funny thing about playground politics back then. You just had your favourite console and you fought in the console wars until death. But you know, years later, I obviously realised the PlayStation 1 was a fantastic console. I picked myself up one a couple of years late into its lifespan when it was a bit cheaper. And when I started building my game collection new 5 or 6 years ago, I really went hard on the PlayStation 1. And that is one of the reasons this collection is so vast and varied. And some of the games are in pretty bad condition, because when I first started collecting, I was just grabbing PlayStation 1 games from anywhere I could just to build the collection. So there's probably going to be some games here that are in some pretty dodgy condition. Some ones I'm going to change, probably a lot of doubles, but let's get into this wild ride. But before we jump into the first games in this full collection video, I just remind you to hit that like button if you enjoyed the video, and please subscribe. As I said, this is part 1, there's going to be a part 2 and even maybe a part 3. As I said, this collection is mass, I don't want you to miss any of these videos. Now, let's jump into this collection. Final thing before we jump into the video, a few ground rules. To begin with, these are all black label PlayStation 1 games. I will be doing a separate collection video for all my Platinum games, as there is a surprising amount. I'm also going to be saving the big box PlayStation 1 games for a separate video because I think they are super cool, as well as some weird stuff like demo discs and some oddities in a separate video. And finally, there is going to be some big name games missing from this list, as at the end of this I'm going to do my big top 20 PlayStation 1 games. These are the games that I love the most in my collection. I'm saving them for a separate finale, which is going to be an absolute banger. From my PlayStation 1 collection, without a doubt, the largest genre of games is racing games. There were so many amazing racing games on the PlayStation 1, and arguably one of the best is Gran Turismo 2, and that might be why I have not 1, not 2, but 3 copies of Gran Turismo 2. This is probably because if you ever buy a bundle of PlayStation 1 games, chances are you are getting this game. But it is one you have to have in your PlayStation 1 collection. But there are so many other amazing racing games you also want to grab. An iconic PlayStation 1 game is Destruction Derby. I'm sure we all played this back in the day, whether having the full game or on a demo disc. It was just a great way, and it was one of the first games I think that really had decent destructibility in your car racing. But a game that no one ever talks about, and I had no idea about until my wife was trying to describe Demolition Racer to me. I just presumed she was talking about Destruction Derby, but no, Demolition Racer, in my eyes, is an absolute hidden gem. This game is really, really good. Like, I think it's faster than Destruction Derby. I think the destruction is more aggressive, and the soundtrack is fantastic. It's just like metal and hardcore soundtrack. It is a really good game. It's super cheap, so definitely recommend picking this one up. Similar to destruction style racing games, we have the car combat racing games, with games such as Hot Wheels Extreme Racing. These are kind of games where you use power-ups to either destroy the competition or just beat them in the race. Another game in this kind of weird subsection is 007 Racing. That's right, it is a James Bond racing game, but sadly it is not as exciting as it sounds, but this one is a super cheap one to pick up. But the granddaddy of the kind of car combat racing games is Vigilante 8. This is more kind of an arena-based car combat game, and it is absolutely fantastic. You definitely want to check this one out. It was very close to getting in my top 20 favourite PlayStation 1 games, so definitely check out Vigilante 8. One of the biggest subsections of the racing games on the PlayStation 1 is kind of the simulation games, and this is one I'm not a massive fan of, but still have a pretty good selection of games for these subsections. First up, we have Le Mans 24 Hours. I cannot really imagine anyone sitting down and playing their PlayStation 1 for 24 hours straight on a racing game, or if it would even survive, especially in 2022. These next two games, I defy anyone who has a PlayStation 1 to say they never owned Toka Touring Cars or Toka Touring Cars 2. I just think every single person who owned a PlayStation 1 had these games, but let me know in the comments down below if you didn't own these games. Another classic racing series was V-Rally, and hand on heart, I played these more on the N64, as obviously I kind of preferred the controls and the slightly better graphics. But it wasn't until I started game collecting for the PlayStation 1 I realised that V-Rally 2 was actually a thing. Well, I haven't got around to playing it, so let me know in the comments down below if you like V-Rally 2. Like Toka Touring Cars, I don't think there's anyone who owned a PlayStation 1 that didn't own Porsche Challenge. Again, seriously, it just seemed like everyone had played this game, whether on a demo or owning the game. So again, let me know in the comments down below if this is not in your PlayStation 1 collection. If it wasn't for Gran Turismo, I would say that arguably Ridge Racer Type 4 is the best racing game on the PlayStation 1. I remember playing the demo of this and being absolutely blown away. And I seem to remember this was one of the first games that used the analog controller. I might be wrong in this one, this is just one of the first games I remember using that analog controller for. And if nothing else, what other racing game can you say you can drive a Pac-Man car in? Of course, every console is going to have its Formula 1 games, and the PlayStation 1 is no exception. So here we have Formula 1 97, again a game that was on seemingly every demo disc. Then we have Racing Simulation Monaco Grand Prix. Kind of a lesser known racing game, but a pretty solid F1 game. And then if you want your F1 a little bit lower, I don't know, F3 or 4, we have Formula Karts. This was the kind of game that was starting to build on the PlayStation 1, kind of the filler titles, let's just say. EA games, I feel, were on a little bit of a downturn when it came to the PlayStation 1. It just seemed like they were trying to just put out as many games as possible, and the artwork of these games kind of testifies to that. So we have Moto Racer, very exciting game. It is a motorbike racing game. Another motorbike racing game, Superbike 2000, in the most matter-of-fact cover art ever created. And the same with NASCAR 2000. Like, I don't want to judge a book by its cover, but these do not look like exciting games. Without a doubt, one of the best things about racing games on the PlayStation 1 is the diversity. Say you want to drive a snowmobile, we have Sledstorm, both in the classics and the traditional cover. Or if you want to drive a futuristic racing boat, you have Aqua GT. Want to drive a monster truck? Play Monster Trucks. Again, you want speedboats? We've got Rapid Racer. If you want to keep it more on the ground and drive ATVs, of ATV Quad Power Racing, or you can go a bit more traditional with some motocross. Or if you just want to go absolutely wacky with it, we have Wacky Racers. We've come to the final racing games. These are kind of what I like to call the adventure racing games. They're kind of soft, open world, kind of pre-GTA kind of games. So we have firstly London Racer, which is obviously pretty much based on the Italian Job, a game which I seem to get all of the time. This is one of the most bundled games I find with the PlayStation 1. So again, let me know in the comments below if you do not have the Italian Job. Next up, we have an absolutely iconic franchise with Driver. And let me know how many of you played a demo of this and then bought the game, and more importantly, once you got the game, how many of you got past the actual tutorial? The most crushingly difficult tutorial of any game. I have barely seen any of this game because of that tutorial. It is just terrible, and I think that even put me off playing Driver 2 for ages because of that tutorial. But these are absolutely fantastic kind of open world games that were 3D way before GTA. That's the end of our first section then, and a couple of things to take away from there. So there is such a large range of racing games on the PlayStation 1, so there is something for everyone. Couple of things that kind of surprised me. I am surprised that the Driver franchise is dead. It's a gutting thing. I really think after playing Driver San Francisco recently, they need to bring that series back. Just maybe make the tutorial a little bit easier. I think the biggest shocker of going back through my collection though is that I do not have the original Gran Turismo. I do not have it in my collection. I think it's just one of those games I just presumed I had. So yeah, that's definitely one on the list I need to pick up. But let me know if there's any other racing games you think I should add to my PS1 collection. This next genre of games might not be the first thing that comes to your mind when you think about the PlayStation 1, but this selection for my collection is first and third person shooters, and I think these really started to take off when they brought out the DualShock controller. The ability to have two analog sticks changed the way you could play these games for the better. When you talk about first person shooters, there are loads of games and characters that come to mind, but without a doubt, my favourite character from any first person shooter, you may hate him, his games may be dead, but I love Duke Nukem, and I love Duke Nukem 3D. I will buy this on any console it is on, even though my main love is Duke Nukem 3D on the N64. And this wasn't the only Duke Nukem game on the PlayStation 1, no. If Duke Nukem Forever hadn't have killed the franchise, games like Land of the Babes may have done. This was kind of a budget. I think when I bought this brand new, it was like $9.99 in HMV. That gives you an idea of the kind of calibre of game this was, but I just love Duke Nukem. I know it hasn't aged very well at all, but I always love that potty mouth, stupid humour. For me, the PlayStation 1 was the first time we were starting to see strategic shooters on home consoles. Normally games like this were first up on the PC. So here we have Rainbow Six, pretty much the definition of strategic shooting, and one of its add-ons, Rainbow Six Lone Wolf. These were games where you really had to think about every single bullet and really plan every attack. Rainbow Six was not the only strategic shooter on the PlayStation 1. We also had games such as Delta Force and Spec Ops. These were very similar games, but it's cool to see this genre of game come onto the PS1. Picture the scene, it's the mid to late 90s and all your friends have an N64 but you have a PlayStation. They've all been playing GoldenEye and telling you how amazing it is, but then the next Bond film comes out and the game license is on the PlayStation 1 and you finally get to play 007 Tomorrow Never Dies on your PlayStation 1. And what a disappointment this game was compared to GoldenEye. It's like comparing chalk and cheese. I wouldn't say this is a terrible game, but it's just not even remotely in the same league as GoldenEye. And let's be honest, I don't think many Bond games ever have been, but yeah, you can't blame for trying. PlayStation 1 may not have had a GoldenEye killer in its game lineup, but it did have some really good shooting games. It was starting to get some really amazing exclusives of its own, and the first one that comes to mind is the Medal of Honor series, even though I only have Medal of Honor Underground in my collection. And these are fantastic first-person shooter World War II games. This was before every other game was a World War II shooter. This game was like groundbreaking for its time. It was such a good game, and it kind of paved the way for what became Call of Duty and so many other first-person shooter games. This is basically where it all began. If it wasn't for another third-person stealth game, this game would have probably made the top 20 games in my PlayStation 1 collection. It is of course Siphon Filter 2, the second game in the series, a series which has slowly died over time, which is a real shame. It's from playing the demo of this, it just blew me away, like the range of weapons you can use, the tactics, the different ways to do a mission. This was such a breath of fresh air to the kind of third-person shooting genre. It is absolutely amazing, still holds up today. Definitely want to add this one to your collection, especially if you're a shooting fan. We've come to the final section in this PlayStation 1 collection series. I wanted to end on a high in this first episode and talk about one of my favourite things to collect for the PlayStation 1, light gun games. That's because with the PlayStation 1 you could finally have arcade quality light gun games at home. Sure, in 2022 you do need to have a CRT TV to enjoy these games still, but trust me, it is worth it. When we're talking about PlayStation 1 games, there are few games more iconic than Die Hard Trilogy. This was a game where you got 3 totally different games for one price. So first of all, you had Die Hard. It was a third-person kind of game where you just walked around Nakatomi Plaza rescuing people from terrorists. Then you had Die Hard 2, a absolutely incredible light gun game. And then Die Hard with a Vengeance, where you just drove a taxi cab around New York just running people over and defusing bombs, but mainly just running people over. These are such iconic games and you have to have these if you own a PlayStation 1. But difficult decision. Let me know which one of the 3 games is best. Sound off in the comments down below. I used to go to the arcades a lot more when I was younger, and one of the main things I always used to look for was light gun games, especially ones you could play with a mate and just try and see if you could get through it on like £1 or so. Remember, it used to be about 25 to 30p a play, so I wanted to try and get through it on £1. But there were some games that were super hard, so when you could play them at home, it meant you had basically unlimited credits. It was a lot cheaper way of doing it. So imagine my excitement when I found out Area 51 could be played at home. This was one of my favourite arcade games. I love the kind of digitised actors they put into the game, and while the PlayStation 1 game might not have as quite good graphics, it's still a fantastic game to play, and this was a tough light gun game. So being able to play this at home and just hitting that continue button for free was priceless. A light gun game that not a lot of people know about for the PlayStation 1 is Gunfire: The Legend of Jesse James. This is essentially Time Crisis with a Western lick of paint, and sadly it's not quite as smooth or as playable as Time Crisis. It's a little bit jerky, a little bit campy, and yeah, it's not bad. As a light gun game, it's only short, but yeah, if you're into light gun games, definitely grab a copy of this. But when it comes to light gun games, the granddaddy of light gun games is of course Namco. They make the best light gun games in my humble opinion. And in making this video, I have realised I have one set of their games sorely missing from my collection, and they are the point blank games. But these are getting more and more expensive, so I'm going to kind of up my game as such in looking for these games. I really wanted to try and hold out to get the additions to these games that come boxed with a light gun in the box, but they are becoming incredibly expensive, so I'm just going to aim to get Black Label Point Blank 1, 2 and 3. But it seems all of the Namco light gun games are getting more and more expensive. As you can see here, I only have the disc only of Ghoul Panic, and this is a fantastic game. It's very, very similar to the Point Blank games, but it is getting more and more expensive. So now is the time to really chase down these light gun games. I would say that Rescue Shot is a little bit of a hidden gem. I don't think people talk about this as much as they do kind of Time Crisis, Point Blank and other light gun games on the PlayStation 1. And that is a shame, as I managed to pick this up a couple of years ago super cheap. And this one right here is really going up in value. So do not sleep on this game. It is a fantastic game, but it's only going to get more expensive. Of course, when we talk about PlayStation 1 light gun games, especially when it comes to Namco, there's only one game that comes to mind, and that is Time Crisis. And this is one of my favourite pieces of my PlayStation 1 collection, if not my entire collection. This boxed and complete Time Crisis and G-Con 45. This thing is a thing of absolute beauty. I bought this quite a few years ago now, and trust me, these are getting more and more expensive, but these are really grail items if you collect light gun games. I love this thing so much. I love this game so much. It is probably my favourite light gun game of all time, and yeah, it's an amazing piece in my PlayStation 1 collection. But that's not the only Time Crisis game on the PlayStation 1. We also have Time Crisis Project Titan. And believe it or not, this one is even harder to get hold of complete in the box like this. It may have a small stain down the middle, if you can see that. This may not be as good a game as the original Time Crisis, but to have this one as well complete in the box, these two together are probably my favourite PlayStation 1 items I own. I absolutely adore them. You know, being a massive PlayStation 1 fan and a massive light gun game, these things are truly grail items in my collection. So there we have it. That is the end of part 1 of my PlayStation Collection video series. And yeah, there is a lot of games to go through, trust me. We haven't even done half of the games I own for the PlayStation 1. We still have all the iconic PlayStation 1 titles to come up. We have wrestling games, platformers, survival horror, you name it, the PlayStation 1 had it. But let me know in the comments down below, of the genres we have gone through so far, what are some of the games I have missed? But trust me, stick around for the next video in this series, there is some amazing games to come. Thank you for watching, I hope you've enjoyed the video, hit that like button, subscribe, and as always, keep playing the game. See y'all soon!